Hey guys, it's Kai here, and I'm going to be going over Poseidon's scaling. I'll be going over his statements, his hacks, his feats, his weaknesses, and any narrative arguments you could possibly implement. But let's just start off with the first one. He was said to be a top tier for the gods roster. He was consistently being compared to Zeus, being his counterpart of the seas, which Enalios basically just converts to ocean or sea in Greek, I believe. So when he's called Zeus Enalios, it's just Zeus of the seas, and he was consistently compared to Zeus. He's stated to be the most fearsome god, states even gods are afraid to invoke his wrath, and depicts Hermes and Ares as examples of gods displayed right next to this. Minor gods are scared of Poseidon through ruthlessness or power, depending on how you interpret it, but I'm just going to leave the interpretation there for you guys. He is said to be the most fearsome god of Olympus. Fearsome means frightening, especially in appearance, which isn't the case with his appearance, although his glare and aura is up in the air, so the most likely reason for being feared is his power and seriousness. Further consistency of him being compared to Zeus, and is stated to be the gods of gods, just like Zeus. So those are all the impressive statements that I consider to be impressive for Poseidon. We'll move on to the next. So now that we have the statements that I would deem impressive or somewhat scalable for Poseidon, let's move on to the next section, being his actual feats. So we got to start off with him obviously obliterating Adamas, just kind of one-shotting him and throwing him to the side. Adamas wasn't a pushover if he was able to even be a contender for the throne against Zeus, although he did need a lot of help. His attacks were described as blinding speed. This is actually the fastest description besides from Zeus's time punch and possibly Shiva's barrage, if I'm not mistaken. He was able to blitz and one-shot Kojiro 18 times before the fight actually started. He's able to react to an attack centimeters away from him and just have a bit of haircut. He completely speed blitzed and dodges Kojiro. He breaks his Valoon. He's able to keep up with cuts all over his body, showing his endurance and I guess some variant of his durability. And here's a fun fact, and here's a feat that I use against Buddha or anybody that has those, he sees the movements. Even if you see Poseidon's movements, you can't react to them. Specific counters to future sight users. Buddha. Best after image feat and fastest attacks outside of Zeus and the time punch. Took Kojiro being thousands of steps ahead of Poseidon to actually get close enough to severely wound him. With the possibility that Poseidon just wasn't able to amp himself further before Kojiro killed him, the possibility that Poseidon is still stronger but was never shown is still a possibility. But Kojiro was worn out after this fight, so they were at the bare minimum relative in the end. That's all I gotta say for his feats. Okay, so now we're just gonna move on to his hacks. Poseidon really doesn't have a whole lot when it comes to hacks. He could part water, I guess, but the only thing I could really find for him is just the consistency of his, statistical amps from when he fights. And it could be seen as a hack, or it could be seen as a weakness, and I'll explain later on. But his statistical amps, where he goes from being able to be read by Kojiro to just completely blitzing Kojiro. And this happens a total of 2 times, where Kojiro gets confident that he can actually read and keep up with Poseidon, and Poseidon just amps his speed up to the point that he just blitzes and is able to damage Kojiro, and Kojiro is barely able to react. He still gets nipped, depending on which one it is. I think the second one, he's barely able to kind of deflect it, and then the first time he kind of just gets his side pierced. So that's what I have for his hacks. Now we're moving on from his hacks to his weakness, which you'll see what. Although I did say that he has some statistical amps, it could also be seen as a weakness because he has a tendency to start slow and work up his attack, so getting the jump on Poseidon is definitely possible. Consistency of Poseidon amping himself throughout his fights. which he's seen as like, oh, he has a hack of amplification, but it's also a detriment to Poseidon because he is purposely weakening himself and is continuously amping himself, which if the cliff is huge, then obviously you can just overpower Poseidon right off the bat. And the thing is with Poseidon, there's actually a further weakness, and it's because Poseidon doesn't actually care for technique, and he only wants to make a battle appear strength. That's what was stated about the way that Poseidon fights. He's not the strategic type. But that's all I gotta say for weakness. Okay, so now we could go over the narrative arguments. So, right here in this image, Brunhilde is attempting to find an opponent for Poseidon. She is searching and is finding a compatible matchup against Poseidon, even though she clearly sees and are even specified that Nostradamus, Leonidas, and Quinn are shown, and she still doesn't see them as being suited to actually fend off Poseidon or pull a win. Since she was going for the win because it's almost, I think in her own words, she said that there's no way that she would come back from an 0-3 lead. Compare that to Brunhilde being confident taking on Hades, another one of the big three, with Quinn. Well, she had Quinn when it was Poseidon's turn and still didn't believe Quinn could win. To stop anyone from saying that this is just me stretching or a variant of headcanon, Hades was out of nowhere. Added to the roster, Poseidon was known by round 1 to be on the roster, and Brunhilde had no counter or match for Poseidon. This scales Poseidon not just above Hades and Quinn, but every human past round 3 to come. Also upscales Kodro. But yeah, so the next line of scaling is going to be the most controversial, and it's Poseidon above Zeus. So here, he's just getting consistently compared to Zeus, the Zeus that just recently fought before Poseidon. This is important because I'll get into it in a little bit. So the knowledge of Adamas, or Adamas Zeus, is fresh in the minds of everyone, and Poseidon still is compared to him. All I have to prove is Poseidon has displayed a feat to qualify himself as a Zeus-level threat. It is known that he took Adamas' life away. Hermes witnessed it, so his power and what he's displayed was enough to be compared to Zeus. This is important later. What is known about Zeus? Although rare, we know he does showcase his Adamas form. So that knowledge in itself is known, so in conclusion, Poseidon killing Adamas, which is the only feat of power that we know of before this fight, was enough to be compared or equal to buff Zeus or Adamas Zeus. Now let's highball Poseidon now. Earlier, I brought up that what he displayed was enough to be compared to Zeus. Most likely Adamas Zeus with what was recently displayed, because that Zeus was the most recent in the mind of the announcer and everybody there. That is the most recent Zeus and the most known appearance of Zeus to that time. This scan states that what was shown was an inkling of Poseidon's strength. This was nearing the end of the match. You can say it was an inkling with how much effort he was using against Kodro, but further in the chapter it states that even if that was true, the actual depths of Poseidon's strength itself wasn't known. So for what we know, he isn't just an equal to Zeus, he could actually be stronger, much stronger. You could simply argue that Hermes, having a good deductive ability, can just assess the full potential of Poseidon, etc., but it was deliberately stated that it's unknown to the gods, and even Hermes has had issues with deducing things, so it's just possible with Hermes and his deduction. The next argument is that he is so intimidating to not be contended, they are compliant to whatever he requests, so has fear and respect from the other gods. And even after seeing Adam Hermes with the best deductive ability, is still questioning being able to even compete with Poseidon is unfathomable. Doesn't find the loss of Heracles too impactful or surprising, doesn't even comment on it, but found it hard to believe that the Poseidon was slain. He was giving Poseidon respect. but he didn't even give Zeus that respect. That could just scale Poseidon above Herc, which I don't think most people would contend against it, but it's whatever. As shown here, Hades, one of the big three, believes Poseidon was the god most suited to be king. Whether you believe this to be from his mindset or power is up to you guys. I think it's a mix of both. And here we have directly implied to not be a lower tier god, where just reaching the level of god is nothing to Poseidon being seen as greater than a god. Other gods were even surprised at the sight of Poseidon even being scratched by someone who was an above normal god threat. Pay attention that Thor was wounded before this, Zeus was beaten to a pulp before this, but Poseidon being scratched was shocking to the gods. Now let's move on further into Poseidon's death. The death of Poseidon upsets all the gods and even shocked the Lord gods. That one, the death of a god was possible, and two, Poseidon, out of all of them, was the one who got killed. So that's all I gotta say for Poseidon, guys, and I'll be giving it back to Honcho. But yeah, peace.